still. It's always
it was simultaneous
like that,
on this end. Yeah.
Hey, folks, welcome to a podcast about Catholic things. This is Eric, the ambassador of common sense, and I'm here with
Dan, the ambassador of nonsense. Welcome, everyone.
And we're a day late. No, 2 days late.
2 days late, because usually we do it on Friday. I was going to ask you when you usually post those. If you post them on Mondays, then, nobody would know we were late.
No, I usually get it done like Saturday afternoon is usually when it gets actually on the thing.
Yeah, so depending on your work schedule, it might be more than 2 days late.
So who knows?
All right.
Are you doing a beer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Beer of the week this week is Elysian Space Dust IPA. Elysian is Elysian for anybody wanting to look it up. The Elysian Brewing Company tagline appears to be beer, music, mischief. It's a pretty good, very hoppy IPA. I think at some bars you might find that it's a little bit more expensive than their other standard beers. But I'm having one while we do this recording.
And I'm having Folgers.
You're having
Folgers.
Folgers, all right.
My normal drink.
Yep.
Let's see. Today we are talking about genetic therapy? Genetic manipulation?
Well, manipulation, I think, is a good all-round word to cover it, because I kind of wanted to explore questions of from a Christian moral point of view, how much genetic manipulation and to what degree and what kinds of genetic manipulation are acceptable. Because there's a lot of tempting good stuff that can be accomplished, and then there's a lot of really bizarre stuff that can be done with the resulting knowledge and technology, even if we pursue the good stuff. Is this,
What comes to mind is things like, the Jules Verne's island, where he's making all these different animals combined with people, and
right, the Isle of Dr. Moreau.
Yeah.
That's what it's called, right? Yeah.
Something like
exactly.
that. Exactly. That's right. What you think of when you talk about that's always been what people thought of when we talked about DNA manipulation. I mean, those are the kinds of things it brings to mind. And then, over the past 20, 30 years, we've come up with a whole new thing, getting, say, bigger crops from a smaller space in the dirt, or growing corn that is not affected by certain herbicides, so that you can kill the weeds with Roundup and the corn stays growing. Things like that.
Right. Or corn that doesn't taste good to insects, for example, so that you get less loss to that kind of thing. Exactly. And then you can bring that into the animal world too, and for example, by using genetic manipulation, maybe you can make let's say that you could make dogs that have, other than just by crossbreeding, if you could directly genetically manipulate a dog to be more obedient or less aggressive, or any number of other things that you might want.
Or maybe some kind of enhanced ability, like the dog that might be able to smell 100 times better than normal dogs.
For example, you use those for drug dogs and stuff, right? Or bomb sniffers.
And, of course, then we start talking about, well, what if we could make a dog that could grow a heart that would fit in a human and work in a human being? A dog. Those are the kinds of things they do.
Yeah, or like a pig, for example. They use pigs for a lot of test. I guess pig tissue is very similar to human tissue in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
and so that's another. Or so then what about humans, for example? Here's something that has kind of intrigued me since I learned this, and I'm going to take a little bit of time setting this up. So when we talk about nutrition and the different kinds of things that we have, so you talk about in your diet you need to make sure you have some protein and that kind of stuff. Well, why do you need protein? You need protein because there are certain amino acids that you require in order to create your own proteins that you can't generate by yourself. Those are called essential. When there's something your body needs in order to do its work and it isn't capable of creating it on its own, then that thing is called essential. So there are certain amino acids that are essential to humans. And so you need to make sure you get the proteins that contain those amino acids in your diet. And then your digestive process breaks those proteins down, and then it can make use of the amino acids. Now, think about vitamins. The definition of a vitamin is a chemical that it's not an amino acid, but it's needed in usually small amounts for the survival of an animal or a person.
Let me cut in here for a second.
Okay.
Would a mineral be considered a vitamin, like iron, magnesium?
Generally, no.
Okay.
And you'll see why in a minute. The other part of it is that your body can't produce it on its own. So it could be. I mean, I think vitamins are compounds. Are always compounds. So a mineral would be like an element, and so that's why it wouldn't be a vitamin. But here's the thing that's interesting. Take, for example, vitamin C. If you could produce vitamin C, it wouldn't be considered a vitamin because it would not be essential. Because essential means you can't produce it yourself.
Yeah.
There are some mammals who can produce their own vitamin C. So that is something that biologically is capable of being produced. Now, suppose we could find a section of our, of our chromosomes that's not used for anything else, and we could splice in the genes necessary to cause us to produce the proteins that would produce vitamin C.
Okay.
So that we could make it so that humans are now capable of producing their own vitamin C. Vitamin C is no longer a vitamin. It's, for humans, it's not needed anymore. And a whole lot of problems that come from not having enough vitamin C now go away. Would that be morally acceptable from a Christian point of view?
I guess we're going to dig a lot into that.
That's the kinds of questions, that I want to try to explore in this podcast and figure out, well, how would you even figure out the morality of something like that?
And then
that's where...
And to actually accomplish it, you're going to have trials.
Yeah.
What do you try this on?
Yeah,
it has
you
to be
find...
Eventually it has to be a person.
There's going to be a first human trial.
Talking about a zygote, and that's a human being.
Right.
And you're fooling around with them, and it's like, there's so many different branches that come off the subject. I mean, I do know people who talk about, to me it's a little over the top to say no MSGs, anytime we ever messed with something genetically, we've made things worse. And we should go back to exactly what they were eating in the biblical days, in the Old Testament. That's what we should eat.
Well,
and it's not possible.
Does that include not crossbreeding corn or anything like that?
Right, because not all of that was genetic manipulation. There's
some
good
of the
or breeding.
like dog breeds. Dog breeds are artificial, and people just bred dogs in order to exaggerate. Exaggerate's the wrong word, but in order to select certain traits that they wanted for different purposes. You've got worker dogs, you've got guard dogs, companion dogs and all that kind of stuff.
The thing is, that was originally rejected by the church. Not dogmatically, but I mean, Mendel was experimenting with mice at first, wasn't he?
Did he do mice? He's the guy you always associate with the flowers and the and stuff like that. The peas, right? Peas and stuff.
Yeah.
So when he was, certainly he would have tried his experiments on animals too.
Well,
so the church,
what I remember,
frowned on that
from like
third
grade, was that he started with mice, and he was told he couldn't do mice because he was doing black and white mice, and that's when he switched to peas or beans or whatever he was doing. I don't know.
Oh, yep. You're right. Okay, here it is. Other experiments under Wikipedia. Mendel began his studies on heredity using mice. He was at St. Thomas's Abbey, but his bishop didn't like one of his friars studying animal sex, so he switched to plants. He also... right?
It wasn't that he was manipulating nature or anything. You don't need to be looking at that sex all day.
Animal sex. He also bred bees in a bee house that was built for him after he designed a beehive. Okay. He also did some astronomy and meteorology. Okay, so not necessarily that the church frowned on the manipulation of the genetic natures of things.
Okay.
But, all of that is still just, there's a point at which somebody could argue you're just taking nature and sort of using nature in a natural way to your own purposes.
Yeah. Even if you're completely rearranging the DNA to create something that's never been created, even if it's a whole new animal, you're still only manipulating nature.
Well, that's exactly, and I think sometimes people miss that aspect of it, that when you manipulate DNA directly, it's not like you're doing something unnatural. It's not like you're controverting nature itself. You're still using nature to your own ends. Now, if what you're doing is, if you're doing something like, I don't know, I want to make a cow that is a carnivore. Okay. Well, cows, you could argue the part of the nature of cows is that they're herbivores. They eat grass and stuff like that. To make a cow that needs meat to eat, and survive, in a certain sense is unnatural. So you could make the point that that's not serving nature.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're making corn that is better able to withstand pesticides so that you get a stronger crop, you're serving nature by that genetic manipulation.
Well, there's also the I think they used goats and tried to manipulate the mammary glands so that the
to produce more milk.
No, to produce the silk that spiders make.
Oh, wow!
Spider thread.
So you like milk goats for silk then?
Yeah, because I think it is some sort of mammary gland in the spider that makes that thread, or something like that. I'm not 100% sure because it's an insect. I don't think they have mammary glands, but it's similar to a mammary gland. And they thought maybe we could get this goat to make silk.
Interesting.
So things like that happen, and it sound. I don't think they've succeeded yet. Otherwise, we'd have we'd have an overflow of silk.
I was going to say silk would be cheap then.
Yeah.
Is this silk worm produced or goat produced? It'd be like, how you got cultured pearls versus uncultured pearls. It'd be like, is this goat silk or worm silk?
Aside from that, the silk itself is a very strong product. And
right.
So
right. They could use it might have industrial purposes.
A giant silk thread. I mean, it'd be you can think of billions of things that could happen out of that.
Right.
The question is, was it sinful to really mess with nature that much? And I see, on the one hand, offhand, I'd just say no, it's not. We're taking what God gave us, we're changing it a little bit, and so that we can use it for different things. But when you look at some of the fruits of this that actually have happened, for example, making these turkeys with breasts that are so big that the turkey itself can't really walk around and function as a turkey would.
Oh, because
I think I heard about that in a
better
documentary.
meat.
I haven't seen more meat. So you've got a turkey is basically it's going to be raised in one small section because it can't
go anywhere.
Yeah, and
right.
Jason told me about a documentary. He saw that, and it kind of hold on. Sorry, I got busy with something. It kind of disgusts you, the thought of doing that and having these birds that are raised that way. I know they're animals, and I know they don't have rights, but it seems against God's plans to make something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly. So it's well, and honestly, it's kind of gross to think about a goat producing silk thread.
Yeah.
In the same way.
It'd be like Spider-Man, you know? Kind of. Remember when we would go out and milk the goats, and our friends would come out and be standing there? We'd just squirt them real quick with the...
Yeah, we just...
you know, milking the goat.
Okay, wait a minute. Did you ever...
Gotcha.
Here's milk in your eye. Did you... I have to admit, I did this. Did you ever go ahead and sample the milk, like, right there, just squirt into your mouth?
I have, and it was so warm that it disgusted me.
Oh, really? You didn't do it
it's
anymore?
Like, oh my gosh, there's warm milk. I don't...
First, yeah, I mean, I've done it a few times, but...
It's just one of those, if you're a boy...
you try it out.
You're going to try it. But
yeah, much more common to squirt somebody who's standing right there.
We are still talking about animals, and I think if you're a scientist and you did do such a thing, I don't know if I'd be able to say that. I don't know if I'd be able to objectively call that sinful.
Right. Is there what is the standard by which you would judge it as evil versus just uncomfortable for people's, sensibilities? Right. I think that kind of goes into the question of how you view the responsibility we have towards the creation that God gave us. I mean,
right.
The scripture says we were given dominion over all the animals.
Yeah.
Right? And so we have a lordship over creation that was given to us by God. Does that mean that we can manipulate it on, increasingly specific levels? When we crossbreed animals, we're doing genetic manipulations. We're just doing it with a fairly crude level of instrumentation. That's one way to look at it. So if we have a very precise instrument, does that necessarily make it wrong?
If you want the best breed that you can obtain, generally, if you're doing either show dogs or show horses or show cattle, you are not going to bring your heifer to a bull. You're going to buy some bull sperm.
Oh, yeah. Right.
When you're really into show animals, usually you don't breed them. You have them impregnated.
Yeah. Right.
So when that crosses over into the human territory, you're already sinning at that point.
That's true.
When you're manipulating nature that much for a human being, if you're, say, artificial insemination, you've already crossed the line.
Right. But let me propose this. Okay. I'm going to present one idea that I read about, I want to say 25 years ago, and then extend it a little bit. So once upon a time, I read about some, at the time, still very developmental, and I don't know whether it's still in, a line of exploration at this point, or whether this is something that turned out to be a dead end. But an idea for certain kinds of brain cancer treatments that involved manipulating a cold virus, a coronavirus, in a way that caused the virus to be very specific in the cells that it would attack, that it would invade, to match the cancerous aspects of this particular kind of brain cancer. And so you would then, you'd have to do a biopsy in order to get a little bit of tissue to produce a certain number of these viruses. And then you would just inject the patient with the viruses, and those viruses would invade. And because how a virus works, it always kills the cell that it invades.
Yeah.
And kill all of the cancerous cells of this particular kind of brain cancer. So you've got a mechanism there for specificity of viral invasion and that kind of stuff. What if you could create a virus that did not actually destroy the cell it invaded, but instead managed a replacement of some DNA, or a splicing of some DNA or something like that? So you say, oh, okay, we're going to make this so that this virus will inject you. We'll use your cells to manufacture the virus, and then once we have it, we'll inject you. You might be a woman or you might be a man, and then let's say you're a man, or let's say you're a woman. That would be more applicable to this kind of scenario. So we inject you with this virus, and the virus targets your egg cells, because a woman is born with all the egg cells that she's going to release throughout her life. It targets your egg cells, and it does this particular genetic manipulation so that your children are now going to have this quality. Okay, so you didn't have to go into that, semination, in vitro, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. Did you cross a line there? Is there,
Right now, the thinking of the church is that genetic therapy of that sort, where you're manipulating the genes of the parent, or of the person, the sexual cells of the person that is going to affect the next generation, they are calling that illicit, morally illicit.
Okay.
I would,
and probably from a point of view of Catholic scientists and researchers, it sounds like they're taking the cautionary line of, we barely are beginning to understand some of the mechanisms involved in this. Anything you do could have unseen consequences that you won't realize. In fact, you could.
That's kind of what they pointed out in the documents that I read. It's like you have no idea what this is going to do, and you're playing with someone's life here. That child born it's going to be a person. When it's a person, and it never, you've manipulated their genes before they ever had a chance to even consent to it, which is another part of it, because there's no consent on the part of the child. And since the child does not exist yet, then you couldn't call it really therapeutic, because there is no defect yet.
Right.
And I mean, you're not fixing anything because nothing exists yet.
You're hypothetically enhancing something, maybe.
Yeah, usually when people think about this kind of stuff, that's usually, there's the one hand of maybe avoiding diseases, but
Well, that's what, like you might be enhancing certain kinds of immunities or something like that.
If you could avoid diseases this way, it doesn't seem like to be a huge step to go ahead and start enhancing other things that doesn't seem like we should be enhancing.
Yeah. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Well, I want to make sure all of my kids are going to be, have a good chance of being,
Gattaca
6 feet tall or taller. I want my kids to have I want to make sure all of my kids have blue eyes, even though I and my wife both have brown or something like that, or
and
vice versa.
As you're doing this, the only way to there's no way you could know for sure. You'd have to experiment. And there's a number of lives that you potentially destroyed while experimenting. And another question might be, let's say other people, non-Catholics, have already done all the experimenting. Now we know that if we do this, the child coming out of that will not get cancer. Is it okay then?
Right. And let's even assume that not only that, but let's assume that we've been able to perform equivalent manipulations and experiments on animals of various kinds. Let's assume that mammal genetic manipulation in order to accomplish specific outcomes, specific immunities, and so on and so forth is old hat, even though it's not done regularly on humans yet. And then some, let's say, non-Catholics, like this guy using the CRISPR,
if
the
we've
guy
done
in China
it, we knew how to
right?
do it for all kinds of animals. Now we're just taking what we've known all along and maybe just changing one little thing in the human.
For humans. Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, at that point, is it like, no, you don't mess with human DNA directly at all? Or is it, okay, yeah, there's a point at which you might, as long as you've understood everything, because we use medicine, we introduce chemicals into human bodies and all that kind of stuff. We give babies, little drops of Tylenol and whatever.
Isn't there something they can do for spina bifida I thought it was, I know there's an operation they can
There's an operation
do on a fetus.
Yes, they can operate on a fetus with spina
But it's an
bifida.
operation, right? It's not any kind of gene manipulation.
Right.
Okay. I don't know why I was thinking that was had something to do with DNA, but what if
you had let's think about this for a minute. What if you could come up with a manipulation, a protein that was capable of identifying and then, if it's there, fixing, but if it's not there, doing nothing, identifying and fixing the genetic defect that causes Down's syndrome?
Right.
Would it be okay to say, okay, a woman's just found out, she's pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and deliver the serum that contains the, whatever necessary delivery mechanisms there are that would allow this to make its way into the developing embryo. And if there's cells, if Down syndrome is there, repair all the cells, repair all the chromosomes that are off. I think there's like one chromosome that doesn't have a second part or something like that. I forget exactly what it is and that causes Down syndrome. But
generally when I think about these things and think about, how far a person can go, I would say, all right, could you do that? What if you could do that same thing with an operation? Would it be okay? And I'd say, yeah, it would be okay to do. I know that when created, this person had Down syndrome, and that's the way God created them. But if you could fix it with an operation, of course you would.
Yeah.
So why not fix it with some sort of DNA manipulation? But again, we're going back to right now in our time. You're gonna cause a lot of death before you're able to do that.
Right.
And
so
reaching that point and reaching the point where we can do this stuff safely, it's sinful to get to that point.
Well, let's go back to that. Yeah, let me play a devil's advocate here. Let's suppose, and a part of the problematic aspect of this is that you've got people who don't want to observe hard lines. But suppose, just for the sake of argument, that you draw a hard line between humans and other mammals, and you say, okay, research just for the sake of developing two things, the knowledge and the technology of genetic manipulations. No problems as long as it's strictly non-human animals.
Yeah.
Is there a moral problem with that? Or is there a point at which we say, well, wait a minute, these animals, okay, as animals, they don't have rights in the way humans have rights, but gosh, we're using them in ways God never intended. Is there some level on which we say, no, we even in the pursuit of knowledge, we shouldn't be using God's creatures this way? I'm inclined to say no, that if you could observe that hard line, that you would be okay as long as you weren't, I mean, it would be more of a specific interior, you've got like the mad scientist who wants to do every kind of bizarre thing, not for the sake of developing knowledge, but for the sake of showing how bizarre he can be. Okay. That to me is, okay, you've got moral problems here, but it has to do with the person rather than with the specific things that he's doing.
If we got really good at manipulating these things, first of all, there would be companies who, hey, we'll develop this 3-headed dog for you and make things like that. And it's...
Yeah. Is there a moral, what would you call it, a moral hazard to that where, on the one hand, there's the pursuit of the knowledge and the capabilities, but is there this idea that we risk getting people so used to the idea of these natural aberrations that it becomes a small step to start saying, oh, I'm going to,
make a 3-headed man.
I'm going to do it in myself. And then that becomes a small step to, I work out fine with a third arm. I'm going to give my kid a third arm. What I'm being extreme and absurd. Right. But is there that kind of moral hazard that itself would make the manipulations themselves immoral to allow, even in other mammals?
I think those hazards exist, but I don't know if you could draw a hard line anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And the hard line certainly isn't that you cannot manipulate DNA. That's...
Yeah. Exactly.
I can't. I mean, if you're, let's go back to breeding. Look, it's wrong to breed people, and we know all about breeding, and we know that if you want an animal like this, your chances of getting that animal are better if you do this, but you can't do that with people.
Right.
However, a good-looking man does naturally go after good-looking women, not just because she's pleasing, but whenever you're looking for a mate, you keep in mind that kids are going to come out of this. Yeah. So if you're young, healthy, good-looking person, and even if you fall in love with someone who has certain problems, you might decide not to get married specifically because those problems could be handed down to the kids.
Right.
If this girl has Down syndrome runs in her family, I don't know if that's something that runs in people's family, but you go to her family reunion and there's like 10 people with Down syndrome, you're certainly going to think twice.
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But still, we do know that there's lines you don't cross. You don't breed people. You don't take an egg and look for the healthiest egg and then look for the healthiest sperm, put them together, and then put it back into a woman. That's
right.
The church is,
and I don't think we've
said that. That in itself is, and we haven't said this yet, but that is not allowed. That's a mortal sin just as much as contraception is a mortal sin.
In vitro fertilization is a mortal sin. And even if it's not in vitro, like you pointed out, okay, when you breed animals, if you've got a show horse, you don't take that, or a show cow, you don't take the cow to a bull. You buy some sperm. That's a mortal sin for humans.
Right. But it is okay for animals.
It's not allowed. It's perfectly okay. Actually, our dog was actually bred that way.
Really?
Yeah. But
what? Why?
Well,
it's not like you show dogs or anything. You don't. What do you get out of that? I would do it just because it's interesting.
I don't do show dogs, but it's the breed, Terry wanted. He's a good dog. I mean, he's really smart. But anyway, it just happens to be that
How much does that cost?
I don't know. It's what did we pay? I mean, we paid more for him than I think people should pay for a dog. But
no, I mean to have that done.
Oh,
because
I'm
probably going to get goats again, and I'm thinking for breeding I might just do that.
Oh, I don't know. The to
problem
me,
is you
I
gotta
think
do it
the
every
cost.
year.
What do you mean you got to do it every year? Oh,
if you're raising dairy goats, and you need
got
the
to
milk,
take them out
then you got
to
to
keep that milk going. Right, that's right. And then you got to figure out what to do with the kids.
And then you got to figure out, is it worth it? Because I've never looked into how much it costs to do that.
That's true. I honestly, I bet it's not all that expensive. But
you did it. So how much was it?
Well, we didn't do it. The person, no, it's not that. We bought our puppy from someone who did that.
Okay. I misunderstood.
We didn't have
I thought
that
you
done.
had your dog bred. I was going to say
no.
weird.
We bought a puppy from someone who did it that way. That's no. That's
I got a friend who part of his job included extracting bull semen.
Okay, wait a minute. Just like what's his name on Malcolm in the Middle?
Yeah.
Okay, wow. I guess that is a real job. Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. I mean, they got to get it somehow, and there's really only one way to do it, and that's what you do. And it's exactly what you're thinking.
So I would have thought that they would just have like
I think you clamp a little thing on there, but you could use like some kind of device, but it's easier just to think of the easiest way to do it.
I would have thought they'd have like imitation cows out in the pasture.
No.
They don't. That's not a real thing. Okay, all right.
Not that I know of, but that's not how he did it.
Okay. Anyway,
these things are all okay with animals, and it's common in society at this point.
Yeah,
that never did develop in. Well, no, I take that back. Breeding the way you think that Hitler wanted to do, that never became a thing in our society. We don't do that. As far as we know, we don't know what the heck they're doing in China.
Well, yeah, no, but what I mean, did we do that in American history? Did slave owners do that?
I would think that they did, but I don't know.
I mean,
you hear stories about, but I don't know if you could. If there's any documented cases. Right.
But stories, it would even be too strong a word. There was I don't know, something like when we were kids, there was something about claiming that black people were like better at sports because back in the slavery days, they were bred for strength and endurance. I don't know if that's real or if that's even a thing.
I don't think it is. I think that's an urban legend.
Okay.
But
because I know that a lot of slaves were permitted to marry.
Yeah, but there were families that were split up because of the slave trade,
And I'm
so you
sure
had a
that
husband
there were
and wife, and they sell the husband up the river, or is it down the river? I can't remember.
Yeah, whichever.
I mean, that happened. So there's human beings being split up. But
the thing is, when you talk about breeding humans, that's the kind of thing you're talking about. You're talking about the idea of human beings being yours to breed.
But the problem is
treating them like property.
If you think about it, it does happen. It is happening right now. Not in a sense a woman who suddenly decides she wants a child, even though she doesn't have a husband, she goes shopping for sperm.
Yeah. Picks a husband out of a catalog.
Yeah. So that next step of manipulating human DNA to do grotesque things, it is real and it does exist. I don't know if that makes the knowledge and the use of that kind of stuff on animals any worse.
Yeah, is it kind of like as a analogy, although a potentially much more grotesque analogy, you could think of modern communications technology and its connection with, say, the porn industry.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, we're using communications technology to do this podcast and hopefully get people informed and excited about the Catholic faith and so on and so forth.
Right.
But the very technology that allows us to do that is used by pornographers to distribute their material, and is used by Satan to make that available to everybody. Is it like that? Or is there an even stronger connection when it comes to the genetic manipulation stuff?
I think it is like that. Only I want to say the greater the good that could be gotten, the worse the bad that could also be gotten. But I don't think it's even that. It seems like the more specific the good we're going after, the more potential for evil there is.
That makes a lot of sense. Because to accomplish the good, I mean, morally speaking, in terms of our decisions and our behaviors, we're called to serve the good. But in serving the good, we strive to accomplish the good. And the greater good that can be accomplished, and the more, like you said, more specific good that can be accomplished, requires a greater and a more minute control over nature. It requires a greater exercise of that dominion that God gave us. And he gave us that dominion in our free will and made us lords of the animals, basically reiterated our dominion over the animals after the fall, even though we had sinned.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things that it's like the atomic.
Atomic power versus atomic.
Yeah. I mean, we could do really great things with that knowledge of knowing how to use the atom.
Right.
We can do really great things, but it is pretty darn specific how to get energy out of this tiny, tiny, tiny little thing.
Yeah.
But we destroyed an entire city with one bomb.
Yeah.
The potential for evil is just immense. And the weird thing is that we haven't used it since then for that purpose.
That's kind of astounding, isn't it?
We've
never actually.
As many bad people have there been in the world who seems like would use it.
We've managed to avoid that.
Used.
That's right. Not that I think the various treaties to try to reduce its presence and certainly to keep it from spreading, I think those have had have helped.
Yeah.
Hi. My granddaughter's here. I got to say goodbye.
Oh,
want a big hug? Bye-bye. Okay.
Anyway, I think it's like, it's one of those things you just kind of lament. There's nothing we could do to stop the nuclear age.
Yeah.
It was coming.
And it's going to be a threat. It's always going to be one of those things that is...
It wasn't wrong to find this stuff.
Right.
It wasn't, the knowledge wasn't wrong to go after. But it's a shame because we know that somewhere, somehow, it's going to be used for bad.
Not only the knowledge, but the technology. For example, to create nuclear power plants and stuff like that. Yeah,
and I think it's probably the same with genes, and there's an awful lot of good that can come out of it, but it is going to be used for some pretty bad things. The question is, and I guess this is where most people I think this is what most people feel. At some point, God's going to say, all right, that's enough. And I think a lot of people thought that the coronavirus was that.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people thought that this was an experiment gone bad and it almost destroyed the whole world, which it didn't even come
kind of ridiculous to even think of it in those terms. Yeah. It's like...
I think our Pope thinks that the coronavirus is that.
Yeah, I read a couple of quotes he had on that, and it's like he is like way out in left field on some things. Yeah. Which, by the way, if you want to write it, you remember my what I said at the beginning about using a cold virus to target brain cancer.
Yeah.
Well, you'd have to test that out, and you'd have to develop that in a laboratory. You could write a science fiction book about a coronavirus that was, that got loose from a similar kind of a thing as I
think a lot of people think that's what this is, because there's still a lot. There's some people denying it, but there's more and more people saying our COVID-19 was made in a lab.
That's interesting. I don't know how to know. If I read people who say it was and people who say it couldn't have been and so forth, I don't know how to know, what's real and what isn't. You know what I mean?
I'm not sure, but I think people are going back to I think the evidence stems from finding patient zero.
Is there?
The first
do we know
person
a patient zero?
Some people say we do. Some people say we don't.
We as kind
because
of a
it
weird
happened in
concept
China.
Because it's in who knows? Yeah, if they say, "Hey, here's patient zero," who knows what
right.
whether to believe them or not because it's China.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I guess.
No, I think you're
right. What we're
right,
saying at this point is that manipulation of DNA is not. It's not inherently evil.
It's not inherently evil. It ought to be. It would be evil to ignore the power behind it when doing so
certainly.
with animals, and then especially with people, if we ever get to the point where we know enough to do it confidently with people.
Yeah. Another thing you get into at that point is things like cloning. And remember Dolly, the sheep?
Yeah, the sheep.
How many years ago was that?
Oh.
They're not mass producing animals this way anywhere that I know of.
No.
Certainly not people. That was the fear back then. That's the kinds of things people would bring up. The science fiction shows of the time was all about cloning, the Matrix type of stuff. And even for animals, that never developed.
Yeah, it's still not a... Yeah, I guess it's possible for them to... the problem is... I think the process of doing so is so involved that it's not economically viable to do that.
There's no reason, because you could just take them out and breed them, and then you'd have a new sheep.
More of the same kind of breed, But I'm thinking of the movies, The Boys from Brazil. You remember that one?
Yeah,
Gregory Peck, interestingly, that's one of the few cloning movies that kind of got the process right, because people think of cloning in terms of you remember the movie with Michael Keaton called Multiplicity?
I didn't see it.
It's a stupid movie. The guy has, he was like, he was having trouble balancing his home life and his work life. He was a workaholic, had a loving wife and a family, and so somebody approached him and said, "Hey, I can make another one of you to handle your stuff at work so you can spend more time with your wife."
Yeah,
so he did,
okay.
And then another, and then
it gets
people think of
silly.
cloning like that.
Yeah.
But
even with the Boys of Brazil, I remember in the description of the process, they even said something to the effect that identical twins are more alike than these clones
because they grew up in the same environment, and that was part of the story, was trying to recreate the same life sequences, the life events that affected Hitler. By the way, everybody, The Boys from Brazil is a science fiction story about a group to clone Hitler and then plant his clones in various places to be raised. And part of the story is that they needed to recreate the life events that occurred to Hitler in the hopes that another Hitler would arise out of it. And one of those life events was his losing his father when he was maybe 16, 17, I forget how old he was.
I think it was even younger. It was like 12 or 13.
It was 12 or 13. Okay. And so they were going around killing the fathers of these boys that were these clones of Hitler that were being raised. But the point is, at least it acknowledged that cloning doesn't mean you pop out an adult equivalent.
Yeah, it's not like Star Wars with Boba Fett, making a whole bunch of Boba Fetts. It's just,
you got to raise them from infancy.
The point is that those kinds of things never started happening. But as we said, things like artificial insemination, that did start happening, and it is to the point where babies have become kind of a commodity. And
exactly. So there
that you can buy and sell.
We don't have slavery, but you're effectively buying babies when you use artificial insemination. You're treating children as a commodity rather than as a gift that flows out of the natural union of a man and woman.
So I guess that doesn't really get us any closer to whether or not it's okay to do this stuff with animals, but it's pointing out that it will happen as we develop these things and as we get better at it,
they will be misused.
There is bigger potential of evil, and it will happen because people are evil.
I guess a way to look at that, though, is that every gift God has given us, we have the potential, and within the human race, there are those who will misuse it. And this won't be any exception. It doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't accept and use the gift. The gift in this case being our capacity to develop knowledge and technology and so forth. And God created us and keeps us knowing that as a race, we're going to have people who abuse his gifts. But he doesn't withhold his gifts because of that.
The thing
because ultimately
is that
he's in charge anyway.
The abuse of these kinds of gifts, the more technological you get, the kind of abuse that could occur is more obvious to any right-thinking human being.
Yeah, exactly.
Any right-thinking human being would have thought, no, you can't buy and sell babies. And that's going on, and it's accepted by some people, even though it's so obviously wrong.
Right.
And I think as we learn more about DNA, the kinds of things that we think is kind of ludicrous that people would actually do, one of the problems is our culture develops in a way that it becomes more and more. Right now, if someone developed a kid with 4 arms, you would say that's just grotesque. It's so wrong to do that. Yeah. But I don't think, just because of the way we do things in our little world, it might very well get to a point where it's not a big deal. or at least where we recognize it as wrong, but people will just kind of look away the way they did with Petri babies.
Mm-hmm. Or, I mean, because developing a kid with 4 arms, all right, but what if at some point you develop a kid with arms and a set of wings?
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, it's grotesque and weird, but look, he can fly now.
Yeah.
Right? You know.
Yeah, I guess that's probably as far as we could go on the subject at this point, because there's so much that we don't know. So I guess from there we'll start moving into the news, which there's surprisingly little.
I have a few things, but before we completely leave the subject of DNA, I'm going to take and this isn't DNA, it's proteins. I'm going to say a few words about people like to think that DNA is the big God buster. Like, for example, they'll say, oh, well, evolution obviously happened and there's no reason to think that God had anything to do with it. And they'll say something stupid like human DNA is, 80% the same as the DNA in a carrot or something.
Oh, yeah.
Ridiculous like that. So I don't know how many people really understand the way things work, but almost everything that goes on inside of cells relies on proteins. There are proteins that break apart the 2 parts of the strand of DNA in order to allow RNA to form from them. There are proteins who cause that RNA to be used to assemble new proteins from amino acids. There are proteins that produce certain amino acids. There are proteins that double check for RNA transcriptions and correct them if they're wrong. There are proteins that do everything. And a lot of those basic life, necessitating those life support proteins for basic cellular processes, they're the same. A polymerase protein is a polymerase protein. They're pretty much the same. And here's the thing. Every single one of those proteins is produced from RNA that's a transcription of DNA. So, of course, your DNA is going to be, in many, many cases, the same as that of a carrot or a frog or whatever.
Yeah.
Because so many of those biological processes rely on the proteins that come from that very same DNA. But here's another thing, and this is where I'm going to step into my ambassador of nonsense, because this is kind of fun to think about as a bit of nonsense. You know those people who talk about reincarnation with people who have like these weird memories of things that it's like, okay, I remember stuff from a past life and that kind of thing. Proteins are chains of amino acids that mechanically fold up in a certain way. And the way they fold up is what kind of determines what they do. They're almost like mini, like nanoscale machines that operate mechanically on other molecules and stuff like that. And once in a while, you can get a protein that gets folded in a slightly suboptimal way. And we call that a prion. And it used to be believed that, that all prions were bad biologically. And in fact, prions are the source of very horrible things like mad cow disease. Because what they do is, and I think this mainly occurs in neurological tissue, but when a prion encounters a protein of a similar type, the prions tend to cause the other proteins of the same amino acid sequence to refold in their suboptimal way. And so now they can't do their job anymore. And so that's why they talk about your brain turning into Swiss cheese. It's like these prions are kind of going out and making other prions of what were healthy proteins, and eventually processes break down and you have something horrible like mad cow disease. But they've actually been discovering that there seem to be certain natural processes that rely on prions, that rely on this alternate folding of the amino acid sequence of proteins. I have a theory that human memory, the brain part of human memory, makes use of prions, and that sometimes when people have these weird memories of old lives, they somehow consumed and got into their bodies in a way that didn't break them down into amino acids and ended up getting into their brains, prions that represented memories from other past people. Now, this is just a hypothesis. What
deja vu is.
Well, that would be interesting too. Like like if there's a stage of a memory being fresh, and somehow that's, those same prion proteins, came back around or something. But again, this is just a hypothesis. It's not strong enough to be called a theory or certainly something that, I really think this is what happens. But it's kind of like one of those what if sort of things, because some of the things that people have reported remembering are pretty freaky in terms of their accuracy. But maybe there's a explanation for this on the biological level.
Yeah. You never know with these things.
Yep. Anyway.
I only understood a little bit of what you said, but we'll leave it at that.
Okay. Let's turn to some current events.
All right. Okay. Have you heard much about the protests in Hong Kong?
No.
How much do you know about it?
Protests in Hong Kong? I didn't realize there were protests in Hong Kong.
Well, there were some protests in Hong Kong because China had taken over Hong Kong and they're losing their
independence
economy.
So when
Reuters got a Pulitzer Prize for breaking news photography for its coverage of the protests in Hong Kong, which nobody even knows about the protests in Hong Kong. What did they break? I don't understand that one at all.
Let's see. The Fugitive Offenders Amendment Bill by the Hong Kong government. Oh, okay. So that, there's like within the last year.
Anyway, it surprises me that they got a Pulitzer Prize for reporting it, and I bet they didn't report it accurately. The kinds of things they're giving Pulitzer Prizes for.
Right.
They gave that guy at CNN for breaking the story about the dossier, the Trump dossier for the hookers peeing on the bed.
Oh,
those guys got a Pulitzer.
Never heard about that
Prize.
one.
You did hear about Trump, the dossier on Trump, reporting that he had hired prostitutes to urinate on a bed because Obama had slept on it at one point.
No, I didn't hear about that.
How could you not hear? That's what the whole Russia investigation was over, is the Trump dossier.
I know. Well, I know about the Trump dossier.
Well, it was
the thing that was put together it was hired by the Democrats as a weapon against Trump. They hired this British guy, right, to put the dossier together. I didn't know it involved an accusation of hookers peeing on beds.
Yeah, it did. They call it the Golden Showers story, even though that's technically not what Golden Showers is.
That's so stupid.
Huh. Anyway, the people, quote, uncovering it got a Pulitzer Prize for it, and it's like, I guess they hand those things out for anything. I don't even know why I brought it up. It's just that was in the news that Reuters wins the Pulitzer Prize.
I guess for having a photograph of something that's going on, huh?
Yeah. So we've got unemployment at 14.7. And the government is going to borrow $3 trillion for the second quarter.
Oh, man.
Which is 5 times more than the previous record.
Wow.
I don't know about these things. When they talk about the government borrowing money, who are we borrowing money from?
They talk about selling bonds, usually.
Selling bonds. And
Yeah.
like places
So
like
what happens
China buy
is-
the bonds, right? So what if we just said we're not going to pay it?
Well, but the thing is, other governments will step up and buy those bonds. China, for example.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. China
So that
has
we
bought
end up
a lot
owing-
of these bonds.
So we end up owing China. Our government owes China money, and then China will try to leverage that for things.
Right. But what if our government just said, you know what, we're not going to pay you? I keep hearing about these stories about how the overspending is going to affect everyone. And I've been hearing it since I was a kid. And the stories get wilder and wilder, but none of this stuff ever happens.
Right.
And I have to wonder, there's nothing to stop the U.S. federal government from saying, you know what, we're not going to take part in this debt anymore. We're going to forgive our own debt.
Well,
What exactly could happen if that happened?
The problem then is that if the government ever needed to borrow money again, it wouldn't have any credibility to sell the bonds.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's kind of like it's kind of like the mobster loan shark who goes easy on somebody who can't pay his debts back. Well, now everybody thinks
Right.
they can get away with not paying. It's that kind of a thing in reverse.
Okay. Well, anyway, they're planning to borrow $3 trillion.
Oh man.
Everything is so bad right now, but it's not bad. People don't know how bad it is yet. I don't think anyone's aware of how poor we are yet.
Mm-hmm.
As a culture, because it hasn't hit. Nobody's run out of food yet. But I have a feeling that's coming.
Yeah. Is there going to be where, okay, it doesn't matter that you even have a job still because you're not going to find food at the grocery market?
Yeah, I mean, look, you
Because
talk
all
to
of the
anyone
food
who
workers
went
haven't been
through
working.
the Great Depression, even Dad, he was a kid during the tail end of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
But he even remembers how bad it was. And if you would talk to Grandma, everything they did in their lives, in their later lives, was kind of
Protecting against
reflective
that.
of that happened.
Yeah,
Of what happened.
That's why they had easily 6 months of salary in a savings account, for example, stuff like that.
And they would guard it like hounds, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
you didn't touch that. That's savings.
Right.
Most people today don't even know what a savings is.
They didn't say, oh, wait, we can go get a new car with this.
No. It was... the Great Depression was bad enough that everybody was affected by it. And everybody who went through it remembers it. And it determined how they would act the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
We're not anywhere close to that yet, even though unemployment is down over 14.5%. It seems like something's going to come out of this, something really bad. I don't know what, but I don't think even if they open the country again tomorrow, I don't think we're out of the woods. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
Speaking of opening the country again, we should mention here the montage that we made and put on YouTube, and I will link to from the website.
Yep, go check it out.
About getting back to work and essential workers.
Yeah, it's I don't know quite how to describe it, but it's worth a watch.
Let's see.
Now, isn't Ohio one of the states that they're suing the governor's presumption of executive power to shut businesses down?
Kind of, but there's also the legislators have tried to put... Here's the thing. The governor's not actually using his executive powers to do a lot of these things. He's allowing the bureaucracies to do it.
Oh.
And some of the lawmakers have decided to pass a law to keep the bureaucracies and the bureaucrats from doing this. And
Good.
Governor DeWine has vetoed that.
Oh, well, maybe they can override his veto. You
Governor...
would think that it wouldn't work that way. You would think that when it comes to telling people you can't open a business and so on and so forth, you would think the presumption has to be on the side of the people, and that the lawmakers would have to make a law allowing the bureaucracies to do it.
Right.
And maybe somebody will bring a suit on a constitutional level that actually establishes that.
I sure hope so.
And give it teeth by suing the governor and the bureaucracies for their overreach of power.
Yeah.
You know, by awarding monetary damages. That would be the best thing. If somebody brought suit and was awarded monetary damages, then governors, police forces, and so forth would be a lot more reluctant to say, "Oh,
maybe.
Yeah, I'm just going to enforce a."
But okay, let's say they a bunch of people sue Ohio and win. What the hell does Governor DeWine care? It's not his money. I'm sorry.
No, but
I want to see people go to jail over this.
Well, okay, it's not his money, but if the people if it's the money of the police departments who actually arrested people, for example, for violating the order, if those police departments are forced to fork over money, the next time a governor tries to say, we're doing issue an executive order, the police departments are going to be a lot more reluctant to enforce the order.
I would
That's
hope
what
so,
you want.
but
You want to
I
give
don't
it
think
teeth.
I mean, I know that orders are handed down, but where would the buck stop? The beat cop doesn't care. He's not going to get sued. So when he sees somebody walking too close together and he arrests them, that goes back on the department.
But the chief does care, and so the chief would tell the beat cops, "Hey guys, this is
By the time
don't worry about it.
By the time a lawsuit affected the police force, whoever was chief is going to be gone probably.
They would have memories. There would be memories of that.
I really think
think
someone like
work.
Mike DeWine should go to jail for this. I'm tired of seeing these people do these terrible things to our economy.
I know. It's terrible that he's doing it, but it would be hard to... I mean, he's saying, okay, I order this, but even though his order is not legally enforceable or constitutional, it would be hard to establish some specific law that he broke for which he could go to jail.
Yeah, I know. I'm not saying it's possible.
I think the best way to give
like
it teeth is by awarding monetary damages.
Well, at least the people who had their lives ruined would get something out of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Right now, we're at the same spot we were last week. Nobody's open. We can't go to church. And they keep giving us 2-week segments. They keep saying in 2 weeks we're going to reopen. In 2 weeks we're going to reopen. And
now, in Indiana,
they keep putting it off.
Restaurants are allowed to open tomorrow, which is kind of a shame because this is Mother's Day. By the way, Happy Mother's Day, all you moms out there.
Happy Mother's Day.
This is Mother's Day, the biggest sales day for restaurants.
Yeah.
Out of the year. And they missed it.
And they're going to open tomorrow.
And they open tomorrow. Wow. Oh, man. That's at least in Indiana, they open tomorrow. Now, here's the thing. Not all the restaurants are going to open tomorrow. They're allowed to open. Some of them are going to stay shut for a little bit longer. Some have had to close their doors permanently, which is a real shame.
I think there's some that are going to be going out of business, especially the franchises and the mom and pop restaurants.
the one-offs. Mm-hmm. But anyway, some will open tomorrow. But our church is Catholic churches in our diocese are, the bishop is giving guidance for when and how to open back up. And it's like they have to enforce distance in the pews and stuff like that. Yeah. Our church is going to open, I think at the end of May, they're going to start allowing some people to come to masses. But if you don't have your own personal bottle of hand sanitizer and a mask, you'll be turned away. Plus, you might get turned away. Exactly. Yeah, okay, this could actually be news from the nation of nonsense. Plus, you'd actually get turned away if they exceeded their capacity, which is almost down to a quarter of the normal capacity for the church.
This is
Plus,
so stupid.
You're expected to use the hand sanitizer before and after communion. I don't know how they're going to do communion if everybody's wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Because you got to move the mask in order to receive communion. And you can't receive on the tongue.
Distance?
Huh? Oh,
How are you going to enforce social distance?
Yeah.
You're going to mass with the people you live with. Why can't I sit with my wife?
Well, and get this. Then for dismissal, they're dismissed one row at a time, and the
for heaven's sakes,
the lector or the priest is going to announce which row is dismissed.
My gosh. This is so stupid.
I'm so glad that the bishop is extending the dispensation because I don't think I'm going to be going to mass until they return to normal.
I
will continue to watch it with my kids. We watch it every week with my kids on TV and listen to the gospel and we stand for the gospel and for the consecration. But
I really want to go to communion though.
I know.
I just found out that there is a way for me to go to communion, and I think I'm going to try doing
really?
that a couple times this week. Yeah.
Where?
Old St. I don't know if I should say.
Oh, okay. Well, don't.
I guess it's okay.
Tell me privately.
Yeah, Old St. Mary's. You can go during these 2 hours they're open, mm-hmm. and if you're there when they open or you're there when they close, you can get communion.
Oh, okay.
Before you leave or when you get there.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, there's an Amazon truck.
Is it like they're open for like private
2 hours,
adoration or
in
something?
And pray. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so
like
it's
that.
Okay. And at the opening and at the closing, they'll distribute communion. That's cool. Wow.
Yeah. So I think I might
do something like that.
Try to figure out way to do that. I should have done it this morning, but I don't know. We're okay in the news. Michael Flynn is they're going to drop the prosecution of Michael Flynn, even though he has pled guilty in order to keep them from destroying his family after they already destroyed him. The whole thing with Michael Flynn has been really bothering me. The fact that Trump allowed this to happen to him.
Yeah, that's kind of...
I keep thinking...
It's like...
Trump, this guy's been loyal to you. Why are you...
Mm-hmm.
Why are you not doing something? I don't know what. And I don't care about all the publicity. Step in there and do something. And he hasn't done anything yet. And it really bothers me. Maybe he will eventually. Maybe Michael Flynn will get some kind of huge reward for how he held out. But it bothers me that he's walking away from this bankrupt and Trump hasn't, done something for him.
At least publicly.
Yeah. Or maybe he did do something privately. Maybe Trump's going to take care of him financially.
On some level. Yeah, that's it could be that there's things that, that it would be inappropriate for him to do officially as president that he's nonetheless making sure gets done.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I feel sorry for the guy.
Pray for that. Yeah.
Okay, a couple little things here. I guess an Apollo group asteroid 2020 JJ passed 4,350 miles from Earth. I think that's the closest near-Earth object since UN-13, which is, I think we did UN-13 last week, didn't we?
Yeah.
So it was closer than...
We had it close?
Well, no, UN-13 was closer, but it's almost as close.
Oh, okay.
So there's this asteroid that came pretty close to Earth.
Closer.
I don't know.
Right.
But I don't think you could have seen it with a telescope.
Yeah. I mean, asteroids are pretty small,
Yeah.
Relatively.
And it's I guess it's closer than Mars, but it's still, there's not much light out there.
Right.
Let's see, European Southern Observatory announced the discovery of the closest black hole to Earth, HR 6819. It's about 1,000 light years away.
I accidentally pulled my wire out of the phone, so I didn't hear what you just said.
Oh, okay.
By the way, hold on. I'm going to step away for a minute.
Okay. We discovered the closest, as of yet, the closest known black hole, HR 6819, has a mass of 4 times that of our sun, and it is roughly about 1,000 light years away from us. You know what? 1,000 light years away. Huh? I don't know. You're talking about the star? Oh, okay. You guys can't hear him. He's saying... How do you spell that, Dan? Okay, Alpha... Okay, Dan's question is... Isn't Alpha Centauri further away than that black hole? And that's supposed to be our closest star, right? No. It's 4.5 light years away. The closest black hole is 1,000 light years away. Yeah. Okay. But if you're gonna, okay, the mass is 4 times that of our sun. Right. What makes it a black hole? Is it the density?
Yes. I'm back online, by the way, so people can hear me again. Okay. I stepped away. Yeah, the what makes it a black hole is the density. When the star collapses to the point where the material is so densely packed together that it's no longer just material within a space, but it has become a single configuration of space-time. It's like a single particle now.
So as opposed to if with our sun we've got mostly hydrogen and some other stuff, so you've got hydrogen atoms, and a black hole would be where those atoms get so packed in together that they're no longer atoms, they're just a configuration of protons and neutrons.
They're not even individual protons, neutrons, and electrons. They're not even, there's no separation of protons and neutrons or anything like that. They stop being an identifiable collection of mass, and they're just this configuration of space-time that causes extreme gravity around itself.
So could you have a black hole that's, say, the mass of the Earth?
That's something that... I've been listening to that titanium physics podcast that I told you about, and they talk about black holes a lot. And they've talked about like small black holes and micro black holes and that kind of stuff. The thing is, a black hole that was like the mass of the Earth would be like so tiny as to hardly have any effect on anything.
Oh,
because that's how dense they are.
Okay. Well, that's the thing. When I hear them talk about, I've listened to a couple of the shows, and they would talk about the size of black holes, but they talk about it in terms of mass, but I still don't understand how big it.
What is the actual size?
I've seen is 4 times the mass of the sun. How big is that? Is that the size of my house, or is it the size of Earth?
Here, I'm gonna do a black hole radius. Okay, so one of the terms used for a black hole. So there's 2 things about the black hole. Also,
is it when we talk about its size, are we talking about the where the matter begins, or are we talking about the, what do they call it, the event horizon?
You're talking about the event horizon. So the way, but here's the thing: the way it works is that if you think in terms of density, you say, okay, this is the density of a black hole, and I'm paraphrasing stuff that I've read. This is the density of a black hole, so much mass per cubic meter or whatever. Mm-hmm. The event horizon, represents the volume, the radius of the volume that the black hole would occupy if it were really matter occupying that amount of space. the amount of space needed for it to be a black hole. So the more massive the black hole is, the bigger the event horizon is. But in point of fact, the black hole stops being mass as such, and so it's the true size of it is almost like it's almost infinitely dense, and it's just this configuration of space-time, super warping of space-time that causes massive gravity. But the event horizon is that radius at which the gravity's effect of the black hole is such that, light doesn't, the escape velocity becomes greater than light at that point. Also, they refer to it as the Schwarzschild radius. But
so I guess once you get to the event horizon, there's no difference between that and where the actual matter is, the center, say.
Say that again?
You've got the event horizon, which that's where the light cannot escape it at the event horizon.
Right.
Past the event horizon, or before the event horizon, light can get around it. But at the event horizon, light can no longer escape it.
Right.
But that is not what we count as where the matter begins.
Right, because we don't
But
think
because
of it in terms
it's
of matter.
not real matter, there's no... It's not like you reach a point where the matter does begin, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Because of the way
it's like the whole of space-time at the event horizon end is just like completely reconfigured. However, in terms of calculating that, you said, how big did you say it was? 2 suns, two and a half?
It's 4 times the mass of our sun.
Okay. So, I've pulled up a black hole radius calculator. So think of our sun, 4 of them packed into a ball that is only 14 miles across.
That's a small ball.
Yeah.
For a sun.
That's the radius of that black hole.
Okay.
4 of our suns. 14. I mean, that's like, that's what?
Is that the size of the event horizon?
Yes, that's the Schwarzschild radius.
How did we see that?
7.3 miles is the radius, so all the way across it's 14.2 miles. But
how did we see that?
Probably because it's
1,000 light years away.
Probably because of its lensing effect on background stars and stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It is amazing. The sensitivity of our astronomical observations is truly incredible.
That is all the news I got.
Okay, well, I've got a few things from the Nation of Nonsense. A cemetery worker was trapped in a grave in New Jersey.
No.
Apparently, he was inside the grave measuring it. The 8 foot deep grave caved in, pinning him up to his knees in dirt. He was trapped for about a half hour until people found him. I guess they're supposed to normally use some shoring of the walls when they're digging it and stuff. Thing is, I thought they used equipment for that stuff. I didn't realize people actually stepped down into those.
I wouldn't think you would have to actually get down and measure down at the bottom. Couldn't you just measure the top?
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute.
And make sure.
Well, maybe
straight.
he was at the top and it caved in, and he fell in because
he says he was working when the sides of the 8 foot deep cave caved in, pinning him up to his knees in dirt.
Yeah, but okay. You've been to a little cliff side where the river has washed out the sand.
According to the sergeant,
there, you're on top and suddenly you're inside it.
Yeah, according to the sergeant that I guess was on the scene, the guy decided to jump into the grave even though there wasn't any shoring on it.
Oh,
so
that was dumb.
Yeah, okay.
I have a fear of being buried alive, and so that's why I made my family promise to cremate me when I'm dead.
Well, the embalming process also guarantees that you won't be alive when you're buried.
Yeah, I know, but I want to be
You're
double
afraid they'll
sure.
skip that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, his pleas for help were heard by coworkers who called a rescue crew from a situation that has prompted nightmares for many throughout the U.S. Taphophobia is described as an irrational fear of being buried alive. So now you have a name for your fear.
Yeah.
Although your fear might not be irrational.
No, it's not. That guy was buried alive.
He was, up to his knees at least.
See? It can happen.
Yeah. By the way, we went and visited graves. I can't visit my family's graves because they're in Cincinnati, but we visited Terry's family's graves, her mom's and her grandparents on both sides, her mom's and dad's, and her grandparents on both sides for Mother's Day. So something people might want to think about. Visiting graves on special days is a good way to remember death and keep in mind your own inevitable death. As Christians, we're supposed to do that anyway. Right. All right. New York City man.
I've never visited a grave.
Really? I've visited Granny B's and Grandpa Braden's, and I've visited Grandma Engel's.
They're not there.
They're not there?
I don't understand it. They're
What?
not there.
Visiting graves? It's
Right.
where their bodies were interred.
I know, but they're not there anymore.
Oh,
They've
I know.
decomposed and
But
their soul's not there.
Well,
I'll
no.
just say a prayer.
Yeah, you visit the grave, you say a prayer, but you also remember your own death.
I could do that from my house.
Well, okay.
I
It's also a genealogy
understood.
thing.
Oh, well, okay, yeah.
But it's, it used to be for a lot of people, it's a tradition to do things like put flowers on certain times of the year. For veterans, might bring flowers on Memorial Day and stuff like that. It's just something people do. It's a way of remembering. And to me, it makes more sense than going out and putting you see those memorials like on the highways where somebody died in a crash or something like that. It's kind of like that, but I think a little bit more, I don't know, dignified. I'm Catholic. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, New York City man finds a body in a taped up freezer. He found a decomposed body in the freezer while cleaning out his dead mother's New York City apartment last week.
Wow.
The freezer had been sealed with duct tape. Body appeared to have been stored there for at least 10 years. It was so
10
decayed.
years in a... Wow.
It was so decayed the authorities couldn't even determine the sex. They're investigating the identities, whether it could be... Wait a minute. A man found it in the freezer while cleaning out his dead mother's apartment. I guess they think it might be the mother's mother,
dad.
the guy's grandma.
Wow. That's,
Yeah.
Did Jason ever tell you about the freezer they found? Let's see. Who was that? Jason or Greg?
Where?
I think it was Greg, actually. He worked at Harbor Freight, and behind there, they came down, and there was a freezer there, like a deep freeze thing. And they opened it, and it was full of dead, rotting, exotic animals.
Wow.
Like snakes
and lizards and stuff like that.
Giant thing, yeah. It was, I think there was a monkey in there, he said, some dogs, and...
So somebody had some kind of exotic animal business that they were doing and decided they had to close up shop, didn't know what to do with the animals and just locked them all in there, hopefully killing them first.
Yeah, that's weird though.
That is weird, that's bizarre. Not as bizarre as finding a person in your mom's freezer.
Right. You know who found Casey?
Yeah.
He caught a dumpster diving when he was a kid. He was like 8 or 9 years old, and they found a skull.
Oh, wow.
A human skull in a dumpster.
Huh. Interesting.
I was watching the news, and I look up, and I'm like, dude, that's Casey.
That's So you saw it on the news.
A skull.
Before he told you or anything, or you heard it from his brother or anything.
I saw it. I was like, that looks like Casey.
That's my cousin. What's he doing? That's funny. All right. Well, scientists have solved have somewhat solved a mystery of a mystery that I never knew existed. But apparently, there are these snails that live like in the hot, like super hot water vents in the ocean and stuff, like basically underwater volcanoes. And
okay.
There's one in particular called the Scaly-foot Snail, which lives in extremely hot temperatures. And these scientists were looking at the genome, and they didn't really discover any specific new genes, but what they discovered was that there's a certain protein in these snails that is like massively overpresent in these snails versus other snails, that makes the snail an animal, an organism, more tolerant to metal ions. And so they're thinking that the massive amounts of this protein make the snail more tolerant to iron ions, so that iron gets incorporated into the shell, and I guess into the foot at the opening end of the shell.
Foot. I'm looking at pictures of it. This is freaky.
It is freaky, isn't it? And I guess this makes it able to survive this massive heat. I guess it also makes it able to survive impacts pretty well too, apparently.
Yeah, I think so.
So
you're like Wolverine.
I was just thinking, we were talking about genetic engineering before and genetic manipulation. I mean, what if you could do like a Wolverine style thing,
Jeez.
So yeah, post a picture of that on or a link to a picture. Don't post. Make it so that people can link, because it is pretty freaky looking.
Yeah.
Okay, the last one. This is so weird. Los Angeles police officer. Okay, it's reported from Los Angeles, but it actually happened in Utah. I guess there was a car that was weaving all over the road. The highway patrolman pulled the car over. It was a SUV. It turned out that it was being driven by a 5-year-old who...
An SUV?
Yeah. Being driven by a 5-year-old who had left home after getting into an argument with his mom when his mom refused to buy him a Lamborghini. So he thought he'd drive to California and buy one himself.
Kids say the darndest things.
And do them, apparently.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I've got.
Okay. I used to work at, I was a dispatcher for this limousine company. Well, I was a dispatcher, and the guy who owned the dispatching company would do various dispatching for various companies.
Oh, okay.
So, one of them was a limousine company, and some 10-year-old had called up. She was going to run away, and she wanted a limousine to take her. She wasn't sure where yet, but she wanted to order a limousine so that she could run away. It was a great call. I recorded it, but I forgot to get a copy of it before I left. I wish I had
too
it.
bad.
It was funny.
So what did you actually
do?
Did you talk her out of it, or did you get the address and send a police?
We talked for a little while, and I think she finally said she wouldn't run away just yet.
Oh, okay.
But it was it was hilarious. The conversation itself was great.
You have to keep from laughing so that she doesn't get upset, hang up on you, and run away anyway.
Yeah, because she's talking about, she's using names of people. He did this, and he said that, and I'm like, okay, I don't know. It was classic kid stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So that's
we're all done.
That's it. Yeah. Almost 2 hours.
Yeah. I didn't think we'd go that long, but all right. Well, folks, think about what we said, and
circle the
as
beads.
always,
Yep.
Circle the beads, and say another extra one for Mother's Day. And
That's right.
We'll see you next week.
And if you haven't told your mom Happy Mother's Day yet, you better get on that.
Yeah, do that.
You're already late. Bye, guys.